Okay, I would like to invite Mike Durand, Industry Sales Director for Bentley Systems, to join Keith. And I'd like to invite Stacie back to the stage, along with Colin Beaney, who's the Industry Director of Energy and Utilities at IFS, for a little Q&A. Don't be shy. My colleague Inderpreet Choker has a microphone, so please raise your hand if you have any questions, and we'll get you the mic. Don't everybody raise your hand at once. Come on, let's see one. Okay, I'm going to have to start then. Let's see. Keith, you talked about culture, and it seems that you had significant cultural challenges at Agrium to make any progress. Do you have any comment on that?
Yes, we screwed it up, is the comment. I think, anybody that reads a culture change book, which we should have done, knows that you need to start with the big picture. You need to, have people understand the message, buy into the message, and work through that process quite carefully. We needed a long-term strategy. We needed, a lot of those pieces in place. But because we were on a fairly short timeline for results, we got very tactical very quickly, which was the mistake, because we ended up having to go back and redo stuff as we went. So I really think that the change management process, and whichever one you choose, and there are many of them, even if you simplify it and pick 2 or 3 stages out of that process, is well worth your while, because it really helps get things set up, and it helps people understand the buy-in to it. And eventually where we've had success, as I mentioned a bit going through, is in the sites where we had a good feedback loop. So where we had operators go out and take routes, and we were able to say, okay, we fixed the stuff that you found, and they started to see their problems go away, then we had an increased level of acceptance. And where we weren't able to do that, and largely because of the salesmanship, we were successful there because of the salesmanship of the one individual. Where we didn't have a strong individual in place, that we suffered. So.
Interesting.
Paula, is it okay to just pick on something around culture change?
Yeah, sure.
May I do that? Yeah.
Pile on.
One of the things that we offer is a optimization capability for resources. And what we've found with that is that, if you don't go through a culture change program, because you are now putting more attention on resources to perform, they will inevitably sort of react, possibly resist, and obviously all of your investment that you've made into this optimization effort is minimised. Tying that in with the sort of Internet of Things, if you like, and the industrial connectivity argument, we have a customer that looks after the ticketing systems on the tube in the UK. I mean, it's actually a North American customer, but they look after the ticketing systems in the UK. And constantly, those ticketing systems are sending information on their health, their status, the issues that may arise back to a central control centre. And generally, unfortunately, it typically waits until something happens before we send out an engineer, before they send out an engineer. But then what you need to do is then optimise the engineers so that the time that the ticketing system is down is effectively minimised. And, in the beginning of that implementation, it was a little bit of a challenge because we were looking at the resources, the system was looking at the resources in minute detail, how long they were taking to get to the repair, how long they were taking to repair the item, how long they would then take in to move to the next job. Just to repeat, I think what Keith's saying, that change management process can't be underemphasised in terms of making sure that you're going to get the right return for the investment that you've made.
I think a lot of times most of us think we do a great job of that when truly we do not. People are resistant to change.
Absolutely.
I'm living proof of that as I look at my paper calendar and my colleagues laugh at me, but I'm sorry, just old habits die very hard. And I'm also very leery of the cybersecurity challenge. Anyway, Mike or Stacie, any comment on that culture piece?
Well, I'm very lucky at Loram. They love change. They push for new technology. Being in IT, that's quite a treat, because a lot of times you get in an organization where they want to be in maintenance mode, and learning anything new is not an opportunity that comes about very often. So with Loram, they really want to have new things and improve their processes. So very lucky with that.
Yes, I'd say the most successful users that we have out there go through a process of defining their business objectives and making sure that their program is aligned with that strategy. And then from there, ensuring that the organization is aligned. So we're going through a complete education process on what's in it at different levels of the organization, the value it brings to each of those, and then ensuring that those people in those roles have the training and competency to deliver. And as Keith mentioned, the technology just is really a supporting fundamental to ensure it's sustainable and achievable to deliver the results and manage all that information, regardless of whether it comes from manual inspections, from connected devices electronically, to bring it all together and make sense and help get ahead of the curve to prevent equipment failures from happening. So everyone needs to buy into the process. The most important thing is executive sponsorship, not only to fund the project, but to ensure it's embedded within the company culture. That is, what we find in organizations we like to work with to, deliver benefit to the enterprise.
And to be fair, they told us that, and we ignored them anyway. So,
just to share a little story, my cable television provider sent me a new modem. I believe it was probably last fall, and they want me to install it. And at first I said, yeah, okay. I opened the box and I looked at it, and guess what? It's still sitting in the box, because my feeling is it's not about what Comcast wants to do for me, but I'm convinced that this new modem is about the services that Comcast wants to provide me. So I've been very reluctant to proceed with that installation. And if they start calling me about it, I'm going to say, well, send somebody out here to do it. Anyway. Ralph.
Okay, thank you. Keith, you made a comment that I really love. And this question is around what was the driver for buy-in, but the comment you made when you quoted the plant manager who said, we're still breaking stuff, but at least we know it's coming. And it seemed both from you, Keith, and Stacie, that the primary driver for condition monitoring with the Internet of Things had to do with uptime and knowing when things are about to failure and having higher uptime and stuff like that. So I just want to ask you, do you agree with that? Did I hear you correctly? And
I think, as a reliability guy, my goal is to provide a condition monitoring data set that allows us to make better information, make better decisions. I say to our guys, we get frustrated because we identify a problem and then it doesn't get fixed. But really, we're providing input into business decisions. And so, somebody has got to make a smart decision at that point. Now, the frustration comes in where you provide data, it's overwhelming, and somebody makes a stupid business decision because he's, after all, is a vice president or something. And that's his prerogative, but, that culture shift needs to then, pervade the organization. So I would say that one of the things that I'm excited about with the new ISO standard, for example, for us in the reliability world, is that you need to develop a strategy document that says we're going to be focused on the reliability of the management of our assets, to use the right phrase. And that kind of changes the game a little bit and a little bit of the thought process. So now we're providing data, and in theory it's being used more effectively. But no, absolutely, that was the goal: stop plant trips and give us more uptime.
More from the IT side. I've implemented many systems, and a system is only good if people are going to use it. So if you look at, you want to increase your uptime, the software has to be very simplistic in its approach, and people need to use it. Having lots of data and storing lots of data, it's not always a benefit. You can say, I collect all this data, look at this, but what do you get out of it? Just like Keith said, you had one one facility collected a lot of data. Was it any use for them? Did it improve them? Did it help them throughout the day? So if you can find the right application for the people in your business, I think it benefits them and it will increase your uptime.
You do need to do that. And what we did as part of that process is to make sure then that the alarm trigger points for that data point that you're collecting are well founded. So if you go to a pump and you're going to take a pencil vibration stick that you can give an operator to an operator, you would put some limits on the reading that he's going to take that says if it's above this threshold, it's a warning, and if it's above this threshold, you better do something about that. And then that's also tied to the criticality of your assets. So you really need to have a strong criticality process, which is why we had to go back and redo ours, so that you can see then that you've got a problem with one of your 8 critical pieces of equipment, and by golly, you better do something about it. So it raises that performance and has taken out some of the subjectivity because we've already agreed on, is this important or not? I think what's tripped us up in the past and what potentially can trip you up is that, for instance, when I started in the world with vibration, there was no smart technology in the handheld devices we were using for taking vibration. So you would have to take your vibration readings from a pump and go back and analyze the spectrum and the frequencies and determine whether or not there was a problem there or not. Now with the AI that's involved in all the software, it'll tell you if you've got a problem, if you've set it up properly, and if you understand what's going on. And so you're now then able to get a much quicker feedback loop on the information you're gathering and the result that it's giving you because you've done the analysis. But in the end, it's only as good as the analysis you've done. So we found lots of problems with alarms being raised and work orders being generated for things that really weren't a problem because we put the wrong limits on the specific inspection point. So we had to go back and redo that.
Really, you would capture right with the handheld devices.
Yeah.
But one of the things to take it a step further is to have folks that make the rounds, the operators, to really understand. I think your metric that you showed up there was $32 a ton or something like that.
Yeah.
And so tying that to what the goal was for the business unit, the metric, sure, you can see, hey, I know that I have high vibration, it's at a warning or alarm level, and I need to take it down and do a balance or alignment or whatever. But to make the operator understand that that metric really goes all the way up the chain, and that's where the bottom line really is.
So and you're absolutely right. And so in the one organization that I can't tell you where it is, but it's a union organization, telling them that we were making the company money, saving the company money wasn't a good sell. But talking about the uninterrupted weekend, the ability to sleep through the shift, well, we didn't actually use those words, but to have a comfortable shift, and particularly for the tradesmen, they'd had a string of weekends being called out, and they got to the stage where the tradesmen did not come if you called them. And they were relying on contractors to show up and fix stuff that they had no idea how to fix. They were basically just pulling wrenches. And so we were able to turn around, and that's the side we had a good sales guy. He's able to say, look, we found this stuff. It's saved you a trip. Yeah, the company saved money, but you got to go watch your kid play hockey on the weekend, and that's a big deal. So we had to work very hard to find the right feedback on that. But it's a good point. Thanks.
That actually sounds like, it could be dangerous. You have contractors in there that are not really familiar with the equipment.
Surprisingly, there's a link between reliability and safety.
Absolutely. They're like hand in glove, man.
I don't know what it is. And you're absolutely right. I mean, what should have been a 9-hour repair on one major conveyor belt turned into a 4-day debacle until the tradesman came back on Monday morning. So,
wow.
There was a lot of stomping around. Let's put it
I'll
that way.
bet.
Yep.
I'll bet. Any questions from the floor here? Oh, we got another one for Ralph. I have one for Stacie actually while we're waiting. Stacie, what kind of systems do you have on your train maintenance assets or equipment? Those look like very expensive pieces of machinery. Are you putting any effort into gathering data from them and when they need to be fixed?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, there's over 2,000 PLCs on the equipment themselves, but along with that, there's a full tower of servers that manage those PLCs that collect all the data and transfer it. There's a wireless connection that will handle the transfer of data. All the operators have their own laptops that travel on the equipment. So they're fully equipped with all the latest gadgets in IT.
Cool. Yeah, it would be a shame to not do that.
Yes.
Quite frankly, if you're in that business, why not do it? Ralph, go ahead.
All right. So this question is for Colin and Mike. I'm a little confused. In the case of Mike, Bentley is known for design authoring tools and in the design and build side of it. And can you relate that to how you get involved in IoT and condition monitoring? And it's similar for Colin with IFS. You're well known for an excellent ERP application, materials management, et cetera, finance, et cetera. And it's a little unusual for an ERP company to be associated with the Internet of Things and condition monitoring. So if both of you could just talk a little bit about how you go from your core competence that you're well known for to this space. And Mike first, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. As everyone well knows, Bentley started in the design and construct side of managing and sustaining infrastructure assets. And back in September of 2012, I was part of the former Ibarra Corporation. We were required to fill that hole that we had in our portfolio is how do we ensure that these infrastructure assets that we're building and constructing are managed and operated as they were designed and to perform the function they need to help organizations meet their business objectives. So that's where the former Ibarra, now the Bentley AssetWise Performance Management Solution fits in to really close that gap and bring Bentley to the forefront of covering the entire asset lifecycle from design, construction, and ultimately driving the useful asset life, to its maximum capability. So when we work with organizations, and what we've done a lot of effort in the last couple of years is integrating our solution into the other offerings from Bentley, from MicroStation, from the design platform, to ProjectWise for managing project delivery, and now we are part of the AssetWise solution to really engage, and we're really trying to push that reliability effort much earlier into the design process and construction stage. So when new assets are brought through commissioning and startup, they have a formally defined reliability program driven based on failure modes, which a failure mode is how a piece of equipment can fail and ultimately why we care and why we're doing these preventative maintenance tasks. Why are we going out and taking that vibration reading? Why are we going out and monitoring that asset? It helps us build that program and ensure we can preserve its useful life over the long term.
Okay. Well, possibly not a lot of people do actually know that IFS, whilst Ralph very kindly said, is a recognised enterprise, an ERP vendor, we actually started life back in Sweden over 30 years ago as a CMMS. It's well documented. 5 guys came out of the university. They set up camp outside a nuclear power station, and they built a CMMS for that nuclear power station from scratch. And that nuclear power station is still a customer. It's now in decommissioning phase, but they're still using IFS. So our heritage, our DNA, is within the EAM market space. Earlier I had the opportunity to talk about our service offering, but if I come back to the maintenance solution that we have, one of the other unique elements that we've got is that ability to handle the early birthing part of the asset. So we're down at the sort of engineering design phase. Because I think, as we all recognise, that's where a hell of a lot of the potential O&M reliability is built in. So the fact that we can hold all of the design detail, the fact that we can hold all of the design changes, the design modifications, the design initial data requirements, and then transfer it into the as maintained as we go through, recognising that the criticality is defined then, and then taking that all the way through to when we're operating it out in the field does give us a bit of a unique position there. And sort of further, if you like, and Stacie mentioned this, and as did Keith in his presentation, you know, if you've got a mobile offering that you're going to put out there in the field, it's got to be easy to use. You know, that's key. If we're going to expect operators, technicians, engineers to complete, you know, the work that they've done on the assets, then for goodness sake, let's make it easy for them to use. Let's give that offering the capability to work offline. And let's equally give that offering the ability to integrate with other systems like condition monitoring. You know, so you've got to have a very modern mobile offering, something that can talk on the device to condition monitoring type capabilities, and at the same time be very easy to use. You know, and if you want to see one, come along to our stand.
Anybody else? Oh, we got a bunch of shy ones here today. I have a question for Keith. Keith, of all the presentations that we've listened to in this session, now that's 4, 3 out of 4 seem to have had a relatively easy time in terms of leadership and getting things done, which makes it a whole lot easier. I would like to ask you, based on your experience now, if you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently? And mind you, we only have about 15 minutes.
I'm not sure that I can say it without being bitter, so no, that's not
I
true.
did notice that in your voice, but that's
no,
okay.
That's fine.
I won't hold it against you.
I think the problems that we ran into were largely the result of having a short-term focus and a short-term need to get results, or a perceived need to get results, and a poor understanding at some areas of our organization about the time it's going to take to get this stuff done, and so on. So at the same time, then we had conflicting priorities because we're behind with our process safety management. We're behind with our some of our process control issues, and we had some considerable work we wanted to do in the Lean Six Sigma field, and we had a guy come along and introduce that. And so now the plants are dealing with 4 or 5 competing priorities, and 4 or 5 sets of effort that are really using the same resources. And so we all struggle, and all of us as program leads struggle with being able to move those things forward, and that created as much of an issue as anything with us. I think, you know, if I'd have known now, you know, then I think we clearly could have got some big picture alignment and strategy stuff in place. And yes, Mike's friends told us to do that, and we chose to ignore them because we thought we had good backing. And you know, I was the #1 priority for a good 18 months, and then things changed. And I think if we'd have provided some different alignment and so on in the first place, I think we would have been better off. Clearly, Dow, it was really exciting to listen to Peter the other day talk about Dow wants to be a technology company, and Dow wants to define itself in this way. And, you know, I'm very happy for Stacie to listen, you know, your comment about we want to get better and we want to do things. I think everybody wants to get better. It's a question of what do you want me to do first, and how do you want me to do that? And, you know, the issue that we see is that so many of those priorities and so many of those issues are very immediate. You can't argue with safety. Personal safety you can't argue with, and process safety you can't argue with. But we need to build, you know, we ended up competing for our programs rather than working together in the way we should have. So could have built some better links between us.
I kind of think that, as you say, safety always generally gets the priority, so that if you can present some of the things that you want to do, some of these new ideas in the safety framework, you have a better chance of getting funded and getting support, as opposed to, oh, this is asset management. So
it has to be. I mean, I have to say, where funding was not a problem. You know, when we asked them for money for software, it wasn't a problem. when we discovered that our mechanical integrity programs across our organization, so by that I mean our fixed equipment, pressure equipment, that program was not going well across our organization, and we needed to spend a considerable amount of money to fix it. We got the money we needed to fix it. The problem, that got some traction and movement because we used a lot of external resources to do the work. The problem we ran into was where we needed to use internal resources. You have a frank conversation with a general manager and he says, "You're number 7 on my list of priorities because I got this other stuff I need to do." And that's difficult to argue with at that point.
So I'm guessing in your new role as a consultant, you'll be telling people to work on their strategy first.
Yes, ma'am.
And let's not forget, technology is the enabler. We have a question, Preet.
Yeah.
Dave Lafferty. If I can see through the lights, it is.
Yeah. Hi, Dave Lafferty, ARC Associate. So what I've seen is a lot of connectivity sort of added to your processes, but they seem to be sort of internally focused activities. And what I was curious about is, are you now seeing pressure from outside people to get to that data also, maybe the manufacturers of that equipment, or maybe people who provide the asset management as a service, those kinds of things? Are you seeing those kinds of initiatives or pressures being, coming forward?
We were getting some requests from service providers because they want to get into your back pocket and do that work. Sorry if I'm insulting you when I say that, but I think it sat through a presentation this morning for a chap from General Mills talked about the paranoia about the cloud and about sharing information outside the wall. Our organization was not into that space at all yet, and so really we weren't looking to go outside. My favorite story about that kind of connectivity that I've got at the moment is my dad works for a company in Britain that makes buses, the double-decker buses you see on the Vegas Strip. And he's been the project manager for a hybrid diesel double-deck bus that's now in the road in Hong Kong, and it's coming to North America soon. So right at Dennis. But they are now monitoring 10 buses, and they have telemetry in those buses that goes all the way back to Guildford in the south of England. And they were able to see on a recent review of the data that 9 out of 10 buses are turning themselves off as expected, because with a hybrid bus, the engine shuts down when you don't need the power. And one of them was not. And they were able to see that the bus wasn't operating the way it was supposed to be. Technician was dispatched. He discovered that the air conditioning wasn't set up correctly, so the AC compressor was running all the time, which sucks a lot of power out of a unit. They fixed it, and it now stops 40 times a day instead of the 1 or 2. And that level of connectivity is really quite important in that kind of equipment, and especially because it's new and it's in that warranty phase for them. It's a very strong business objective. We were not. We were just getting into buying new equipment for a new plant, and I think some of that discussion is floating around, but still very anxious about it. The cybersecurity is a big issue, but also just the sharing and the vulnerability of information.
Anyone else?
Well, Loram's pressure really comes from the customer side. They want to see the data that we collect. I don't know if they're micromanaging or they just want to make sure that we're doing the service we tell them that we have to do. Loram's not in the website business, so we usually contract that business out and send our data another place besides. So it's a unique area there to have to send your data out and give it to your customers and show them that we are doing what we said we're doing.
Not used as intended. We're not supporting this.
Yeah.
And no warranty here. Any comment from Mike or Colin on that one?
I don't. Not being from the manufacturing environment, we're seeing more connectivity, but we're kind of dealing with a hybrid as new infrastructure evolves and new greenfield sites develop. So we're dealing with existing infrastructure and then working with new infrastructure as it comes out of the ground. So it's a mix of the types of information we're collecting, whether it's someone physically, humanly going out and observing something or grabbing a piece of data from a system that will help us determine that how something's performing in its asset.
Yeah, I think Bentley Systems right now, between the asset-wise and project-wise, you're really the embodiment, if you will, of, if you sat through Ralph's presentation yesterday with the ARC Asset Lifecycle Management model of reusing those lessons learned in the operate and maintain phase and bringing that information back and using it again.
As you build new assets.
Those lessons
correct.
learned, absolutely.
mean,
Colin,
yeah,
excuse me, if you don't
please.
mind my saying, you talked about IFS getting its start as an EAM company, and now primarily known perhaps as an ERP company. I know you have a reliability offering, but we don't hear too much about that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why that is. I mean, we equally have an RCM offering, clearly fully integrated. As mentioned by Keith, implementing RCM though is more about adherence to the philosophy rather than the tool set that you use. The fact that it can take all of your equipment structures, all of your fault codes, all of your existing PM routines into the tool set, allow you to manipulate those and then squirt them back is a real benefit. But you've still got to, fairly religiously follow through the strategy. If I could just talk about the sort of S word, strategy. Keith touched on that, and it was almost as if he was teeing me up to repeat something that we mentioned and made a press release about earlier on this week. Is that we're sort of embarked on a process of building a corporate performance management capability that links strategy to the KPIs on the shop floor, and that element of it is so crucial that if you've got a lot of initiatives going on, you've got to be able to see how the initiatives link into the strategy of the organisation. So the first thing that you have to do with the CPM capability is map your business, define what your strategy is, and then drill down from your strategy, to the KPIs.
I have to think that integration would be a breeze with IFS. It shouldn't be a problem. Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
So I've seen cases in this asset performance management, like there's one with GE and their turbines where they get data from over 1,000 turbines in 80 countries in the world. So they have this huge, rich data source, and they have a whole team of people analyzing that data and finding failure modes and such. Keith, in your example, you were talking about, you had about 1,000 to 1 where you were getting like 4 million alerts, and it resulted in 4,000 events that you believe you prevented outages or some loss. What are you doing with that data? Were people looking at each one of those 4 million items? Were there automated routines analyzing those? And what's the path forward on that as you collect more data?
We're very happy to collect data. So doing something with it was kind of next stage for us. It's a very good question.
I think
Some of our groups were definitely looking through, and so what I should do is just validate your comment a bit. 4 million pieces of information we captured. Of that, 4,000 were pointing to a problem. So we certainly looked at the 4,000. If we're collecting data that is normal, we pretty much ignored that. It didn't give us, we weren't at that level of peeling that layer of the onion yet. But we were definitely trying to categorize and pull together some of that data in terms of what are we finding. And much in the same way you would in a safety thing, you're looking for hand injuries or neck injuries or back injuries. We were looking for, is it rotating equipment, is it fixed equipment, is it instrumentation, is it what? So some very, broad stroke categorization. Our desire was to build up enough of that information to use some analysis tools and be able to do some more slicing and dicing, and that's kind of phase 2 or 3, whichever one we're on next, for us to do that. So yes, but we're not there yet.
I think one of the advantages that GE has clearly is, they're a big aero engine manufacturer, and that industry probably leads the way, obviously, in reliability. And one of the benefits that you get in that industry, across different manufacturers, different OEMs, different suppliers, is that they generally identify the plant, the asset, to the same level of system. So they have a sort of defined system category, the ATA chapter, that systems and reports and reliability and faults are all reported at, and then cross-industry you can compare. And I've got an expectation that that's where most of us will go in this reliability world. You know, we will record the data and then use that to compare cross-industry so that we can all help each other and each other's plant become more reliable.
I think what we'll see, you know, 55,000, the ISO standard is going to, it's unfortunately vague enough to apply to anything, which is good, and it doesn't define things enough. But I think as that standard starts to gain traction in North America, particularly where we don't like ISO standards very much, I think we'll start looking at some of the others. So there is and I forget what it is, 14226 or something, that is the standard for failure codes. And there's another, you know, there are many other standards that are as part of this suite that you can start to look at and start to use as some level of standardization, and I agree with you completely. If we could, you know, provide the same scrutiny for electric motors, 100 horse and up, as we did with gas turbines strapped to an airplane, my life would have got a lot easier, because we had, you know, we didn't have a lot of big expense failures with motors, but we have a lot of motors that fail. And so, you know, the story goes around the $2 million motor. It's not, we have 20 motors that fail at $100,000 a piece, not $20 million worth of motor that dies. So I think that's going to be a stage forward. And I think, you know, as we get back to the topic at hand with the Internet of Everything, is that we all need to agree to play in the same way and to organize ourselves in the same way to make this viable. Yeah. And I don't see that happening in a big hurry. We talk about, you know, some of the industry groups that are getting together and some of the initiatives that are there about building stuff, and, you know, we heard about the design one that the guy from GE was talking about this morning. Sorry if I don't remember it. But, you know, I find my opinion on where North American business is it's still very competitive, and so all of that is seen as a competitive advantage. And so that information is quite protected. I contrast that to some of the work I've seen done in the UK and in Europe on some of the studies they've done there, where there's a lot of open sharing and a lot of consistency of categorization that's allowed, you know, organizations like the London Underground, you know, Waterworks and others to come together for a study to share common data to build a set of best practices that says, here's how we ought to be treating our equipment. And they all walk away from that. And I think that's a culturally different part of the world, and we need to get there for that. So,
just before we close out here, you brought up ISO 55000 and how Americans may resist that because of its international appeal, let's say, because it wasn't developed in America. But I think that one group in the States here that is catching on to this is the insurance industry and the insurance providers. And that has captivated them, and I believe that they will be the ones to exert the subtle pressure for everyone to be certified at some point.
And I think if you look at the history of that standard, just to sort of waffle on for a bit longer, in the UK, the PAS 55 standard, which is the predecessor to the ISO standard, has allowed the industry regulators to apply the screws to industry to get them to do the things that they ought to be doing. And I think particularly in the North Sea, but also in the privatized utilities, you know, water and so forth. And I think that, you know, these standards, as they transfer and get more codified, that's where we'll see it. OSHA will grab a hold of this standard. Yep, I mean, it already points to it, because there's a RAGAGEP, you know, regularly accepted, generally good engineering practice clause in the OSHA standards that require you to follow good standard. They'll latch onto that pretty quick and say, why aren't you doing this?
Yep,
and that'll drive the change.
Yep, agreed.